all the news from the Space and Missile Defense Symposium, today, August 18th, 2023. Good morning, early birds. I'm Simone Perez, and this is the Early Bird Brief, produced by Defense News and Military Times. Today, land warfare reporter at Defense News, Jen Judson, reports back on her time at the Space and Missile Defense Symposium with CSIS missile defense expert Tom Carrico.
Hi, I'm Jen Judson, land warfare reporter at Defense News, and welcome to the Early Bird Brief, a special discussion on missile defense with Tom Carrico, missile defense expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And we've both returned from the Space and Missile Defense Symposium down in Huntsville, Alabama. I think this is about my 8th trip down. Tom, I think you've been there far more than I. You're quite the veteran. So what was your impression of this round of the Space and Missile Defense Symposium?
Yeah, no, it was a great conference as always. I did count it up just now, and it's the 26th annual SMD Symposium. I think I've been to at least 10. So not that many more than you have. But no, great event, and all the usual suspects come down to talk everything about the space in terms of this stuff.
Sure. But I feel like there's a few missing elements this year, at least for my coverage. Strategic Command was missing this time around because, they no longer have the missile defense mission as they did before. So I was sad to see that Strategic Command was no longer on the agenda for a speaking engagement. I think in the past we got quite a bit of interesting news out of those conversations. General Hyten made some news, I think, was 2 years ago, maybe 1 year ago, where he talked about that Chinese orbital fractional bombardment capability that the Chinese had tested recently. So those are always very colorful pictures of what the threat looks like. And we did not get that this time. I think the other challenge that the show had this time around is that we are waiting for confirmation for a variety of leadership roles in missile defense, one being the Missile Defense Agency director himself. He is still waiting, Major General Heath Collins, still waiting to be confirmed. So we also had the acting Missile Defense Agency director who was named the week prior to the conference. Unfortunately, because they're acting and because they're not confirmed, they couldn't speak at the level that the Missile Defense Agency director could speak. And so we had speeches that focused, in the case of the acting director, who is currently the director of test at MDA, discussed testing, and General Collins discussed mostly what was within his portfolio. However, he did discuss a little bit about what the agency is doing right now, but couldn't really lay out his priorities, couldn't really discuss where things might be headed beyond what's already the case at the Missile Defense Agency. So it was very much an Army show to me because a lot of those Army officers in positions like PEO Missiles in Space, Rapid Capabilities and Critical Technologies Office, those guys are well entrenched in their jobs by now and were able to speak really thoroughly about what they're working on more than we could get from the Missile Defense Agency this time around. Also missing the U.S. Space Command commander. He did not come this time around. Might have been a little awkward just because...
That's probably a good choice.
Yes, because, the recent decision to keep U.S. Space Command in Colorado instead of Huntsville, I think, left things a bit awkward for the Huntsville community. So instead, a deputy at U.S. Space Command spoke at the conference this time around. So a little interesting.
But you make a good point in terms of the STRATCOM, for instance. So I guess it was, a couple months ago when JIFIC IMD, the Joint Functional Component Command for Integrated Missile Defense, formally moved under the new Unified Command Plan from STRATCOM to SpaceCom, which I think most folks were very supportive of. Space Command, of course, was already the global sensor manager for all the different missile defense radars and things like that. And the fact that the head of JIFIC IMD, which in this case is currently Dan Carver, which is to say the head of Space and Missile Defense Command within the Army, all of that helps conspire to what you are kind of sensing in terms of the Army heavy presence at this conference. It is, of course, in Huntsville, Alabama, which is the home of SMDC and Redstone Arsenal more broadly, so that's always a common feature as well.
Yes, absolutely. Strong presence there. And And General Karbler was quite a strong participant. He is waiting for his retirement. He is among this group of folks in limbo as we wait for more confirmations.
Well, he noted in his opening remarks that command is the best across DoD in terms of contentment among folks working in the command, and that's an impressive statement.
I actually stopped by Space and Missile Defense Command on my way out yesterday, and they have a large poster advertising that it is the best place to work in the Army. General Karbler has a lot to do with that, as well as his great staff there. That do a lot of work to make the Space and Missile Defense Symposium a great one. Tom, what did you think were the hot topics at the show this year?
Well, look, there was quite a diversity of things covered there. The CUAS, counter-UAS thing, of course, General Gainey from the JCO, the Joint Counter-UAS Office, was there. For me, though, I think probably the highlight was the number of people talking about the defense of Guam and things related to the defense of Guam. Again, back to your Army-centric observation there, perhaps not a surprise. It was, I think, June 20 when the department named the Army as the service acquisition executive. Bill LaPlante in charge of the defense of Guam effort overall, but the Army is the lead service. And so you're going to see some officers or officials and officials being named to kind of go out and implement that, I think, here pretty soon.
Pretty much in every speech that I attended, listened to, and the conversations that I had, Guam was brought up. Most of the things that the Army is developing right now will be a part of the Guam architecture. I think there was quite a bit of discussion, at least on the first day, with some of the Army officials in charge of Program Executive Office Missiles in Space, General Lozano, particularly talking about integrated fires capability and conducting integrated fires test campaign that essentially is kicking off later this fall, where they will begin to integrate various aspects of air and missile defense capabilities together in this test campaign, starting off small with the integrated battle command system and the lower tier air and missile defense sensor, LTAMs, and those are all going to play a part in the Guam architecture. In subsequent years, they'll keep adding capability, but they brought up so many different capabilities that we're going to see on Guam, from mid-range capability missiles, which have been fielded to the first unit. That's all aligning with the Guam architecture timelines.
As we've seen in Ukraine, even a limited air defense goes a long way in terms of having a strategic effect. So there'll definitely be stuff there sooner. A couple observations. One, I was actually just on Guam a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to see, for instance, for myself, all the comments that I've heard about kind of the need for infrastructure. And I would heartily agree. It's going to take a decent amount of infrastructure, of MILCON, to kind of get it up to where it needs to be to support, just about every air and missile defense asset that across not just the Army but the Joint Force to get there and support that. Now, in some respects, and I heard a couple of folks say this actually, be careful, how boutique, bespoke a defense capability we think about it as. In some respects, the defense of Guam is just like the defense of anywhere else. It just so happens that, when you're in that part of the world and facing a particular Chinese threat, it is an extremely wicked threat set that you're up against. But I think that observation that I heard from some general officers is a wise one, so that the problem doesn't become so daunting that we can't get started. And the challenge as well is going to be how we pull all these things together, which is to say the integration. And that's where the integrated fires campaign and such is going to come in as well.
And I remember Admiral Hill, before he retired, the Missile Defense Agency director, who just retired, spoke quite a bit about the infrastructure on Guam and how that's a challenge. This is a tourist destination. It's, you can't just put these things wherever you want. There's also the fact that there's ordnance potentially underground. You have to be very careful about where you're digging to put some of these capabilities or entrenching things, and even making them look pretty, talking about putting domes and things over them. I did want to ask you, do you think that the typhoon and some of the recent weather that Guam has had has affected or set back the process of being able to set up the infrastructure?
bad weather is common to that part of the
Right.
world. I was told while I was there looking around that the equipment tends to wear out about 50% faster than other parts. Part of that may be related to the humidity. It's pretty sticky there
Yeah.
all year round. But of course, there's also logistical problems that feed into that when you don't have the parts depots. That sounds really boring. We want to talk about big policy stuff, but having the parts and maintenance and the regular things like that go a long way to helping, obviously, the sustainment be what it needs to be.
And I know you got a chance to listen to General Collins speak, who is the current nominee for the Missile Defense Agency director. He manages the ground-based systems for Missile Defense Agency, like our Homeland Defense,
Yep.
as
GMD.
well as some regional systems. So he was able to speak pretty thoroughly during his speech. Was there anything in that was striking to you? Anything that he focused on that you didn't expect him to?
Yeah, it was a good MDA overview. Again, within his capacity as the ground-based program manager. But the thing that stood out to me was the feature on space sensors. Hypersonic and ballistic tracking space sensor, HBTSS, is always in there. But there was a video, and it was a little.
It's usually a 30-second.
Yeah, I would say it was a foot stomp,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that was good precisely because it's going to be some of the prototypes for that are going to be orbited later this year, pretty soon here in a couple months, and so I think that was a good move to highlight that, and it's a good move I think in part because there will be a potential valley of death transition moment as those prototypes, that medium field of view sensor, is tested, demonstrated, and then in some way through a joint program office handed over to the Space Development Agency, SDA. So it is the only fire control quality sensor that the department is pursuing.
In terms of what's next, what are some of the things you're going to be watching for now that you've had a chance to digest some of the ways that the Missile Defense Agency is potentially headed and some of these other program offices and commands? What are some of the things on your radar?
Two things. One, on Tuesday, General Lozano, the head of PO Missiles and Space, spoke. He had some great videos, but he also had like one slide that showed everything that his office was producing, and let's just say it was a busy slide. There is
Yes.
a lot of missiles and missile adjacent programs that they are working on there. Stinger replenishment, Stinger replacement, the next generation Stinger kind of thing, just to hit one particular PM within the office. That's going to be a challenge because you mentioned LTAMS, the radar, and the IFPC cruise missile thing. They want now a second missile for the IFPC cruise missile defense capability, enduring shield launcher. So there's a lot of stuff. It all needs to happen. It all needs to come together. It all needs to be able to plug into IAMD battle command system, and it all needs to do so in a meaningful time window for the defense of Guam, for instance, as you said. So a lot on his plate. So all of those things are real important. And then right after him, I moderated the acquisition panel.
Yes.
Great discussions there from RICTO, from SMDC, but also from the two directors from Army Futures cross-functional teams, Colonel Pat Costello for Air and Missile Defense and Colonel Rory Crooks from Long-Range Precision Fires. And I'll tell you, there was an interesting conversation between us about engagement authorities and kind of how, in some respects, we're really living with a tightness in terms of the engagement authorities for air defenders. It's really a function of learning the lesson of 2003 when there was that friendly fire incident in 2003. But we are in a very different world. We cannot take air superiority for granted in the way we kind of could in relative to a small country. So I'd also kind of look for things like that. I think that as we come to grips with the reality of this massive air and missile threat that is the world right now, we're going to have not just lots of acquisition stuff, but operational changes as well.
Right. I think another thing that we should be watching for is just a lot of these efforts coming from the RICTO office, the Rapid Capabilities Office. In the future, we've got a hypersonic weapons common glide body test with the Army and the Navy that should be imminent. It's expected, I think, any time now. If it goes well, it'll be great because that means that the Army and the Navy will be able to field their rounds. The Army currently has a unit set up with the equipment. They're just missing the rounds. And so this test will be very important if it goes well. If it doesn't, I'm sure they'll learn their lessons. I don't know what the impact to the schedule will be on delivering rounds to this unit, but that'll be something to watch. And then if all goes well, another thing to add to PO and Missiles and Space's portfolio, it will be the hypersonic weapon mission as well. Mid-range capability missiles are just added to PO, Missiles in Space, and then coming in FY25 will also be directed energy maneuver short-range air defense capability on a Stryker. That's living in RICTO a little longer than I think was originally planned, but they have a lot to work through when it comes to laser weapons on the battlefield.
They're putting every effector you can imagine hanging off the side of a Stryker for the counter-UAS and the MSHORAD missions, things like that. But you highlighted the MRC and LRHW piece of that, and they're standing up a new PM, program manager within the office, and the person who's going to be doing that, the strike PM, was announced on the acquisition panel, Colonel Farrell. So that's great to hear. But you highlight that they're going to have to do some kind of a design turn. Yes, a tech insertion probably, but also some kind of a design turn to get the cost down and increase the manufacturability of that. Of course, it is a joint program between Army and Navy, but I suspect you'll see some initiatives on that front.
Absolutely.
That's it for us this morning. To get more top stories and breaking news, go to defensenews.com/EBB to subscribe to the Early Bird Brief newsletter. Please give us a like, rating, and a comment wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on social media @defense_news and @Military Times. The Early Bird Brief is hosted and produced by me, Simone Z. Perez. Today's guests were Jen Judson and Tom Carrico. Our editor-in-chief is Mike Bruce. Have a great day.